Hey, everybody, thanks for joining. You're at our Sequence of Returns Risk webinar. I think everybody knows Maureen Walker, our content strategist at DMI. She's going to help us through the surveys. She's going to help with questions. Use the Q&A function or the chat function. Maureen will capture those, and we'll find a nice place in the presentation for Erick to answer those questions. You probably have also met Erick Lindewall in the past, or maybe seen one of his presentations. Been with DMI for, well, I'm not sure how many years you've been with Erick, with DMI, Erick,
About
but 4.5.
Yeah.
But you've been in the business for 31 years, to my understanding, and really, you're in good hands with Erick. We always appreciate his expertise on matters like sequence of returns risk. So I'm not going to do much more of an intro than that. And I just want to get into this topic. This is always a good one. I also want to make people aware that we are going to share a sequence of returns risk flyer after this webinar, whether you're DMI licensed or not. But for those that are contracted with DMI, we're going to give you a compliance approved larger flyer that really talks deeper through the topic. And then further, if you're also licensed with DMI, we're going to give you a sales kit next week that's going to have everything from a PowerPoint, a customized video from Erick explaining how to use that PowerPoint with clients, and then also how to use the flyer with clients. So it's just kind of like a little sales kit that you can use out in the street. That's one of many resources available in my back office, available to DMI licensed agents. So with that being said, Erick, what have you got to say about sequence of returns
Ready to
risk?
roll. Well, thank you, Glenn. I'll tell you, I've been in the business not for 31 years, for 33 years, and I've been introduced hundreds and hundreds of times. And of all the introductions I've ever received, Glenn, that was one of them. I'm only kidding, having a little fun with you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we're going to talk about a topic that is really, in my opinion, one of the most important topics that we can discuss with our clients as we talk about retirement and planning for retirement. We're going to take about probably 20 or 25 minutes today, folks. And as Glenn mentioned, my name is Erick Lindewall. I'm one of the vice presidents of annuity sales here at DMI. And our role is really to partner with agents and advisors to help them understand the application of the products that we utilize, but more importantly, help them solve the most important financial problems and challenges that their clients face as they transition into and through retirement. So, the concept of sequence of return risk or negative sequence of return risk is something that I've been discussing really for many years. And I find it so interesting that we sometimes in our industry get really focused on detail, on asset selection, product selection, performance. And we sometimes take our eye off the ball with respect to some of the hidden challenges that our clients face in retirement. And sequence of return risk is, in my opinion, the single biggest challenge that clients could potentially face in retirement, and that could eventually derail their retirement. So we're going to go through this presentation, and what I'd ask is that you take away from it the concept of what negative sequence of return risk is. And if I could choose, one thing that you take away today would be a desire to articulate this challenge to really every client that you work with, to make sure that they understand it. Because in my opinion, no one ever seeks out a solution to a problem that they don't know exists. And so this is a problem that we're all potentially could face when we retire. And it's important that we understand it, because when we understand it and recognize it exists, we're a little bit more open to taking steps to mitigate the problem. So I'm going to take just a moment here to share my screen and get rolling with the presentation. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so everybody should see my screen now. And obviously, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about sequence of return risk. And I think the first thing we need to do is define it. So it has to do with bear markets and bad markets, right? So let's talk about a bear market and really what it is. And a lot of this is pretty elementary, but it bears repeating. What is a bear market? We certainly can't predict when they're going to happen. But historically speaking, we experience a bear market about every 3.5 years, and they last about a year, right? So, you could certainly say that 2022, fit the bill there. We all might recall how poor the market did in 2022. In fact, the S&P, which is really a barometer for equities, was down about 19.5% in 2022. And there was really no hiding place in 2022 because bonds were down about 13 or 14% as well. So there's a really good chance that all of us and all of our clients are going to experience a bear market at least once and possibly more than once during their retirement. Now, I really want to stress that second piece of that sentence, during retirement, because how we deal with bear markets in retirement needs to be very different than how we deal with them during the accumulation phase or our working lifetime, because the impact of the market has a very different effect during retirement. And we're going to dive into that. And on average, it takes about 3.2 years to recover from a bear market. So with that as a backdrop, let's talk about what sequence of return risk is and really kind of dive into the concepts. So what is sequence of return risk? It's basically the risk that you experience a set of negative returns during distribution in retirement, right? So when you withdraw money from a portfolio while it's declining, it effectively accelerates the race to zero. And it, as the screen says, dramatically impacts a portfolio's ability to create sustainable, predictable income for the duration of one's retirement. We're going to look at a couple of different examples on the next few pages. And I think that you're going to find that this is a concept that every client you work with that is either close to retirement or just transitioning to retirement, they're going to want to know about this, and they're going to want to understand it and possibly take steps to mitigate this risk. Before I move forward to this, I want to just give a little explanation of a big change that happens or needs to happen in the thinking and the mindset of clients as they transition to retirement. When we're in our accumulation phase of our lifetime, it's beat into our head that we want to be patient when we're investing, right? We don't want to react to down markets. We want to be patient. We want to stay invested. We've all seen the charts, right? So while you're accumulating money for retirement, don't panic when the market goes down, because historically the market's always come back and done well. That is true. That is true. So we spend an entire working lifetime with that mindset of be patient, don't react, don't worry about the bad times, because the good times will save you from the bad times, right? So we transition to retirement with this mindset that I'm not going to worry about when the good years happen and when the bad years happen. And that is a recipe for disaster once you start to take distributions from a portfolio. And we're going to show you that. So let's dive into why they matter. We kind of talked about this already, the relationship of returns and the impact that it can have on one's retirement. This is the next two slides, folks, is the whole concept. So this is someone who is starting with $100,000 and they're investing long-term for future retirement. Now, a lot of times we get focused on what did the market do last year? What's it doing this year? What do we think it might do next year? But quite frankly, the year-to-year returns don't really mean a thing. In fact, these are two portfolios, Portfolio A and Portfolio B, and they both start with $100,000, and they both average 8% per year over 24 years. Now, you will notice that Portfolio A and Portfolio B are experiencing very different returns each year. Portfolio A is starting out losing 12% year one. Portfolio B is making 29% year one. But again, this is accumulation, set it and forget it investing. At the end of the day, 24 years down the road, both portfolios averaged 8%. They both arrive at the same place at the same time with the exact same amount of money. In fact, what you will notice, you've probably already picked up on this, is that all we did with these return sets, these annual returns, is invert them. Portfolio A experienced 3 bad years in a row early in accumulation. Portfolio B experienced 3 bad years right at the end of accumulation. But they both averaged 8%. They both ended up with the same amount of money. So this goes back to my comment that I made earlier about in accumulation, patience is your friend. Not reacting to year by year returns is typically a recipe for success. So these two clients transition into retirement at age 65 with a nest egg, and they both have the exact same nest egg, $691,000. And a common mistake that many people might make is having that don't panic, be patient, just let it ride mentality as they transition into retirement. When we're in accumulation mode, we can control how much we invest and we can control how we invest, right? What we can't control is when the good years happen and the bad years happen, but patience wins out. Now, when you transition into retirement, you still can't control when the good years happen and the bad years happen. But unlike accumulation, where it doesn't really matter long term, it has an incredible impact on one's retirement once you start taking distributions. So we're going to look at retirement. So these same clients are now in retirement, and they take their $691,000, and they're going to start to withdraw some income off of that money. So let me stop for a moment and kind of give a general overview of what these clients' lives look like. For many clients, they get to retirement and they have a particular income need that absolutely has to be met. I like to refer to it as the gotta have income number. And for many folks, that income that they need in retirement is going to be met by a variety of sources. Certainly, Social Security is part of that. If they're lucky enough to have a pension plan at work, that's going to be part of it. But for most Americans, their income comes from Social Security and withdrawals from what they've saved for retirement, right? So for these particular clients, they're going to start withdrawing 5% per year from their investment portfolios. And that's going to be adjusted every year for inflation. So we've got the same exact portfolio, still earning the same exact 8% on average per year in retirement, taking the exact same withdrawal. But what you'll notice is these clients are experiencing a very different retirement. And the only difference between Portfolio A and Portfolio B is luck. Portfolio B was lucky enough to retire in the midst or start their distribution plan in the midst of a rising market. Portfolio A was unlucky, and they started taking their withdrawals in a bear market. So as you can see, the results are very, very different. So let's take a look at Portfolio A, because that's really the scary scenario. Client starts with $691,000 and, in the very first year takes out their withdrawal, their 5% withdrawal, and the market takes out another 12% withdrawal. And then the next year they take out their 5% withdrawal, market takes another withdrawal because they're in a bear market. And you get just 3 years into retirement, and this client is going to come to an epiphany, right? They've had 3 years of poor market performance, and they're taking out their retirement income withdrawal, which, as we mentioned, is their gotta have number. That's a combination of Social Security and what they take out of their retirement dollars. That's the money they need to make this whole retirement thing work. This is not their dream number. This is not their 4 vacations a year and buying a new boat. This is keeping the lights on, keeping the insurance bills paid, keeping food in the refrigerator, things like that, right? So they're 3 years in retirement, and they've got to make some choices. You'll notice that withdrawal at age 68 now does not represent 5% of their portfolio anymore. It represents about 11% or 12%. And I don't think there's anyone on the webinar today that would suggest that an 11 or 12% withdrawal rate is sustainable. This client's got to make some very difficult choices. They've got to, A, dramatically reduce their withdrawal reflective of their new balance reality. B, hurry up and die, not a great option. Or C, probably go back to work part-time, because they are going to have to reduce their withdrawals reflective of their new balance. And so, don't we see that in the market, out in the marketplace? Don't we see that out in our local communities? I always, kind of tell a story of going to a big box store, maybe a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Walmart. And, you walk in and I'll use Home Depot as an example. Walk in and take a census of who's working there. But don't do it Saturday morning at 9:30. Do it Tuesday morning at 9:30. And what you'll find is that I promise you 10 to 15% of the people in that building will be retirement age or older. Some because they want to be. Some are there because they have to be. That's the face of sequence of return risk. So really, I mean, in a nutshell, we can do everything right from an accumulation standpoint during our working years. But if we are unlucky enough to retire in the midst of a down market, that is the one single thing that can derail 40 or 50 years of proper planning. This is, folks, sequence of return risk in a nutshell. And there's really no way, or very few ways, in which you can avoid it if you utilize the typical diversified portfolio, systematic withdrawal approach to retirement income planning. So you'll notice on portfolio A, if this client just continues to march down the road of taking out their withdrawal without respect to, without paying attention to the declining balance that they experienced in the early years, that's a retirement portfolio that runs out of money at age 80. Right. So when the money's gone, the checks are gone too. So this same exact client, if they're lucky enough to retire in the midst of an up market, now we're looking at portfolio B, quite frankly, they don't have any worries. In fact, by the time they get to age 80, they've taken out all the same income, and, their balance is almost $3 million. Right. So the only difference between these two outcomes, these two scenarios, is luck, whether you retire in the midst of an up market or retire in the midst of a down market. So none of us have any idea of what the market is going to be doing when we retire. The natural question is, what can we do to protect ourselves against sequence of return risk? Now, I'm just going to stop, catch my breath for a moment, and ask Maureen, did any questions pop in as I was going through this slide? I put Maureen on the spot since she's muted.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, you did. I wasn't really expecting that right there. No questions at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now that we've identified the risk, let's talk a little bit about ways in which we can take this risk off the table. Ways to shield your retirement against the consequences of a bear market. One strategy that we use with the agents and advisors that we work with is talk about bucketing sources of income, right? Having multiple solutions available to a client to pull income levers, right? So creating different buckets of income to be able to utilize as clients transition through retirement. Taking risk off the table, that's pretty self-evident. But you don't want to take all risk off the table, because certainly we still have to be able to grow one's money through retirement, especially if they have concerns about legacy and leaving money to the next generation. Lowering expenses during the initial years of retirement, that's a consideration, but oftentimes the early years of retirement are the most expensive years of retirement. That's, we've all heard of the go, slow go, and no-go phases of retirement. Typically, the first few years of retirement are when clients want to do all the cool stuff they couldn't do when they were working. So, reducing expenses and having less fun isn't necessarily something that I want to do when I retire, right? But for some people, it's a necessity. Consider a second career. That happens more common than you might think, especially for those that really do experience negative sequence of return risk. That is not a choice made by most people for fun. That's a choice made out of necessity. Delaying retirement, boy, we're seeing that now, aren't we? Retirement ages and retirements are getting pushed back. And then certainly, most importantly, working with a financial professional such as all of you here on the webinar. Understanding the problem is the first step in solving the problem. Like I said, nobody ever solved a problem they didn't know existed. So that's why we like to talk about sequence of return risk and help you all effectively articulate what the risk is to your clients, so that ultimately you can help them protect themselves against that risk. Are fixed annuities a good fit, and fixed indexed annuities? Well, there's a lot of reasons why you might consider utilizing these types of solutions when working with clients. Obviously, you've got interest guarantees. If it's non-qualified money, you can benefit from tax-deferred growth during the deferral phase prior to triggering income. Guaranteed income for life, that's the big win with fixed indexed annuities, and really the most effective way in which you can protect your clients from sequence of return risk and put some very specific guarantees around their retirement income plan. There's certainly access to money with free withdrawals, death benefits, and a number of other benefits. But with respect to guaranteed income for life, today's webinar is not intended to talk about product. All right, that's not what we're here to do. But there are some very specific guarantees that a client can benefit from when they utilize these incredibly powerful solutions. Clients have an ability to mitigate sequence of return risk with the stroke of a pen. A lot of times when we talk about product, we really get into features and benefits, and product A does this and product B does that plus 10%. Clients don't want to know how the watch works. They want to know what time it is. And guaranteed lifetime income solutions that have contractually guaranteed for life income provide stability with just the stroke of a pen. So every client situation is a little different, but if you identify a need for guaranteed lifetime income, you have the ability to look a client directly in the eye and tell them exactly what they can expect for income at a particular point in the future, guaranteed for life, or for 2 lives if it's a joint life situation. And the only thing that has to happen for that outcome to come true is the stroke of a pen. That is incredibly powerful when you're sitting with someone trying to help them figure out what their retirement's going to look like. So let's go ahead and move on here. So does life insurance have a place? The short answer is yes. Now, I mentioned that I'm one of the VPs of annuity sales here at DMI, but for those of you that don't know, DMI is a full service IMO. We have a robust life insurance division with very seasoned professionals on the life insurance side that can help you navigate what is becoming an increasingly complex world on the life insurance side. But these solutions can help provide additional sources of cash in retirement, and really are incredibly valuable planning tools that oftentimes, when combined with annuities, can really help you develop an ironclad retirement and legacy plan for your clients. So obviously, we're talking about annuity solutions, or a problem that is oftentimes dealt with by utilizing annuity solutions. Just know that DMI wants to work with you on the life insurance side as well and help you implement that into your practice. So the bottom line is this: we're here to help. We don't believe that today's webinar is giving you certainly everything you need to go out and have a conversation about sequence of return risk with your clients as soon as you log off. However, the information is available to you. So I know Maureen's going to give you more information here in a bit, but this webinar, that slide deck, and some of the slides are available in a customizable client-approved marketing piece where you can walk a client through those 2 scenarios, the accumulation scenario that we looked at, as well as the distribution scenario, and really help you have this conversation with clients. Again, we're not using the sequence of returns as a way to sell annuities, right? We believe that annuity sales and life insurance sales will happen, but it's really this webinar and these pieces are designed to help you raise awareness to an unseen risk that many folks, or all folks, are going to potentially face in retirement. We know a lot of things as financial planners. We know product. We know how to structure one's portfolio. Here's what we don't know. We don't know when the good years are going to happen and when the bad years are going to happen. That is something we cannot control. The market does what it does. What we can do is structure one's retirement to have protection from the unknown. And if you think about what would make someone sleep well at night in retirement, I know personally, myself, I'm 56 years old. I look forward 9 years to retirement, and I evaluate my personal sources of retirement income. And for me, I want my gotta have retirement income completely protected. I want to know what's going to be there, no matter what the market's doing, no matter whether we're at war or peace, no matter what the geopolitical environment is, and no matter how long I live. Because I know this: my essential expenses in retirement care about one thing in retirement: getting paid. And so my checks to meet those need to be there each and every month, forever, no matter what. And so myself, I have implemented a fixed indexed annuity with a guaranteed lifetime income rider into my retirement plan. So I sleep well at night knowing that my essential expenses are going to be met. Now we can plan, we want to plan for the want-to-have retirement, right? The trips and the boats and the yachts or the mountain house or whatever it is that is the dream for your clients. So we plan for that. We protect the essential expenses, and that's where we can help. So I'm going to go ahead and catch my breath for a moment, turn it over to Maureen here for a bit, and I'm certain there must be at least a few questions.
How'd you know, Eric?
Not my first rodeo, Maureen.
So there's actually a couple of really good questions. The first one that I'm going to ask is someone asking that there's a lot of solutions out there, every wholesaler says that their company's product's the best. But so in your opinion, oh guru, what company really has the best?
So get that question a lot, right? I could never tell you what company is best until you told me about the client, right? And so here's what I mean by that is retirement income planning solutions are as unique, or each retirement planning situation is as unique as the client's own DNA, right? Things like age, whether it's single or joint, and deferral period, all kind of change the recipe when it comes to winners and losers. What I can tell you is this: with the agents and advisors that we work with at DMI, our approach is as follows. Identify the problem and what the goal is for the client. And then once we've identified what we're trying to accomplish, we go out into the marketplace and evaluate all the solutions. And we just find winners. There's winners and there's losers. And we bring those to the agents and advisors we work with and present them to them. Here are the 2 or 3 solutions that you should consider that are absolute best in class for this particular client situation. Here's what's great. We're not beholden to any one company. So for those of you that have wholesalers that work directly for carriers that call upon you, guilty. I did it for 22 years before I came to DMI. That wholesaler's job is to sell that company's product, right? That's their job. So if you've ever had the wholesaler tell you that they're the best in every situation, they're doing their job. We are product agnostic. We have access to dozens and dozens of carriers and literally hundreds of products. So there is no one best solution. It's all client dependent. That was a long answer to a short question.
But it makes sense. It's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about buffered annuities with income riders, and how competitive are the index products with income rider when compared to what's available in like the RILA space?
Gotcha. Yeah. So we get that question a lot. So for those of you that don't know what buffered or RILA products are, these are registered products. So we at DMI do not represent buffered or RILA products. So fair disclosure, but I do know the space well, wholesaled them in the past. So the advent of RILA products or buffered products with income riders has just created a little bit of confusion in the marketplace because they're sometimes referred to as indexed products. They're not. They are sold by prospectus. So those of you that have FINRA registrations, you know what they are. Those of you that don't have FINRA registrations, you need to know how to compete with them, right? But to the question. RILA products, buffered products, generally speaking, do not have contractually guaranteed roll-ups to income bases. What they have is distribution rates that step up over time during deferral. So if you look at a RILA or a buffered illustration, they're going to look really good on the back-tested return page, right? Looking at past performance, projecting it forward, applying a distribution rate, they're going to be really competitive. Where they're not going to compete as favorably against an indexed annuity is on the contractually guaranteed page. So what I can tell you is this: are they bad products? No, they're not. They're good products. If you're looking for an absolute contractual guarantee, the indexed annuity, in my opinion, is going to win most often. Indexed annuities can be structured so that if the markets or indexes do really well, the performance-based income on an FIA is absolutely, positively competitive with RILA, right? So we're starting to see, a lot of RILA companies kind of suggest that they've reinvented the wheel. Not the case. I encourage folks to give us an opportunity to compare. We'll win our share.
Okay. Thank you. There's actually one more question, unless another one comes in. So what do we do with clients that have purchased annuities maybe years ago? I know times have changed and products have changed. How do the income solutions available today compare to those from years ago, and how do we know if it makes sense to consider making a change?
Well, we got to do the math, right? So looking back, I spent 23 years as a variable annuity wholesaler. There's just a ton of old variable annuities in advisors' books of business, and living benefits have been getting sold, a long time, probably, 04, 05, right? So it can be a challenge sometimes trying to figure out, hey, this old product, can I do better? So typically, that conversation that I have with advisors typically starts with, tell me when the client's going to turn in, right? So we have to have that line in the sand. And then we have to look at things like, the market value of the existing annuity, what the income base is, whether there's any particular guarantees. And then we typically just evaluate, hey, if you leave it alone, here's what it will produce at X point in time. If you were to make a change, here's what it would produce at X point in time. We'll also compare fees. Typically, you're going to be able to get an income solution all-in expense far less expensive than variable annuities. That's pretty standard. Obviously, you're going to be able to take market risk out of one's life with an indexed annuity, or variable annuities. We're still going to have market fluctuations, good and bad, right? But with respect to doing an annuity review, because that's what we're talking about, we do that all day long, every day. We compare and contrast annuities. And quite frankly, there are a lot of times where I'll say to the reps I work with, you can't ever touch this thing. It's too good to be true. Because there are some of the early living benefits that were out there were mispriced. They were very robust on feature, very low on cost. And there's a reason those insurance companies don't sell them anymore, because they were too good to be true. So we don't touch them. But what I will tell you is this. Here's the call to action. If anyone on this webinar has a large book of old annuities, in particular with living benefit riders, if they're variable annuities, you've got a window of opportunity that's open, and it will slam shut the next time the market corrects, because they may have market value here and income value here, who are pretty close, right? And we can make an improvement. But if the market corrects and you get a huge divergence between the market value and the income base, then it becomes mathematically impossible to improve, right? So, 2023 was a great year in the market. 2024 is starting out okay. And we're getting close to parity on some of those old contracts. So the call to action is this. If you have 1, 10, or 100 old annuities on the books that are out of surrender, we have to talk, because you've got an opportunity to potentially reduce fees, reduce risk, and dramatically increase one's future guaranteed income. But again, the opportunity goes away if the market corrects. So nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Eric, do you mind sharing that last screen on your PowerPoint presentation again, real quick? I just wanted to mention Eric's phone number, email, and there's also a QR code on there. If you scan that QR code, you'll be able to download all his contact information into your phone. So I wanted to be sure people could reach out to you, Eric, because that's a good point. That's a great CTA, and Eric, there's nobody better than Eric to support you with that. And Maureen, you know what? I know we're at the top of the end of the meeting here. And I just wanted to maybe have you review with everybody what they can get as either non-DMI licensed agent or DMI licensed agent, and then maybe cover the upcoming webinars, because they're very much related to today's topic.
Yes, absolutely. There's a reason we kick off the year with this topic, because it really does touch everything. So if everyone goes to DMI University, there's going to be our upcoming scheduled webinars, which include things like IUL and taxes, how to mitigate taxes in retirement using IUL. We've got a great retirement income webinar, how to think like a 21st century strategist. When it comes to that, we're going to be going over building more fortified retirement incomes for about 50% less capital, which is a fabulous webinar. You'll be leaving with case studies that we can use for that. For today's presentation, everyone will get a recording of the webinar and a flyer on the sequence of returns. But if you're already contracted with DMI, that's where the good stuff comes out. Right. So in your My Back Office account, in everything else, there is a 4-page customizable flyer that you can use with clients. It's compliance approved. You can put your branding on it and be sure to put your disclosure. And then we will have this webinar, but we will also have a PowerPoint deck that you can use, which looks very similar to this webinar you just saw. This PowerPoint deck, you're going to customize with your logo, your name, your disclosures, and you can present that in your own webinar. You can present that one-on-one. And the best part of all of that is Eric has really taken the time to sit out and make a quick tutorial video on how to walk your clients and prospects through sequence of returns. And he has some additional insights and sales techniques that he throws in there and peppers throughout his short tutorial video. So you're definitely going to want to check that out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maureen. And Eric, really appreciate it. Well done. And everybody, please reach out to Eric. He can help you out in a number of ways, as you can tell from the presentation today. So thanks again, Eric. Thanks again, Maureen. That concludes the session. Have a nice day.